You're listening to Keeping It Real with Janine, your guide to living an authentic, healthy life. Today's inspiring conversation is with Ricardo Hubbs. Ricardo has evolved his childhood delight in taking photos into creating his version of the best job in the world. It's fun, fulfilling, and he gets to work with some of the top people in their field. I'm sure this will be an enjoyable conversation, and Ricardo will share with us some fun stories. Above all, he's an excellent example of an ordinary person pursuing his extraordinary dreams. Ricardo, thank you for joining me today.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. Have
Yes,
fun.
I think this is going to be great fun. I know we don't get a chance to chat very often, but when we do, I thoroughly enjoy our conversations. You know, when we separate, I always feel so good and uplifted, and that inspired me to have you on the podcast. And frankly, I don't know anyone who knows you who doesn't enjoy being around you and admire the life that you've created for yourself.
Oh, you're going to make me teary.
So let's start with, this conversation. You and I were already chatting beforehand and getting into some really interesting topics. So we can let this go wherever we want. But let's talk a little bit about your career and how you became interested in photography and how it all evolved.
Right. How did it evolve? Well, one of the interesting things, I'm what they call a unit stills photographer. So I take photographs on film sets, whether it be a feature film or whether it's what we call an MOW, a movie of the week that you would see on a Wednesday night when you come home and sit down with your family and watch it at 8 o'clock, or a TV series. So I have quite a bit of a variety in my work, but generally they're always, I'm on set, the actors are acting, I take photos when the actors are acting, and they use them in publicity. So that's what I do now. We can get into the depth of that. But what I find interesting about the position, it's sort of that I find when you're around young people, or when you're a young person, there's this burning question of what are you going to be when you grow up, and you're trying all these different things, and life is many seasons and chapters, and you're kind of exploring all these things. Some people find their job right away when they're 19, they graduate and they work for Pfizer for the rest of their life or something. I didn't do that. I bounced around a lot. I waitered. I ran a little digital film company at one point, and kind of all these little random jobs about. But one thing now, looking back on my life, I just turned 50. When I look back on my life, is every photograph of me standing there, I've got a camera on me. And all of these photos, and it's sort of like, sometimes what you're looking for is literally right underneath your nose. And people used to say to me, like, oh, wow, you're a really great photographer. And, I'd say, thank you. But it was my mom and dad. Of course, they're going to say I'm a great photographer. Or and I felt like, of course, they're going to tell me I'm a great photographer. But there was no internet. So, other than looking at National Geographic, where there were incredible photographers, I just really know there was no measuring stick for me. Like, how good was I? Well, magazines were like super good. And then there was the rest of us who could never see each other's work because there was no internet, right? So, yeah. So looking back at my life, I was always a photographer. I just never really put the two together. And maybe my life experience just needed to happen for me to become the photographer I am and train my eye the way it's been self-trained because I've been taking photos. I've backpacked all over the world for, years at a time. And the camera was always my travel mate. I traveled alone most of the time, and generally my camera was the one who saw me from beginning to end. So, yeah. And then, maybe I'll talk about how I became a stills photographer, which is an exciting story to itself. So part of these many jobs that you do, particularly in the Kootenays, there isn't a main industry. So, your fingers are in many different pies to just have income streams coming in. And so they were going to be making a major motion picture in Nelson, which is a beautiful little town. So they were making a movie there. And when you make a movie, they have to bring in all the crew and the cast and directors and producers, from the grips to the storyboard artists to the actors to everybody. And all these people are coming to Nelson. They need a place to stay. I was the guy who was hired as the accommodations coordinator to find was a great gig. I got to be, the nosy neighbor, and I got in every little house in Nelson, and turned over all these rocks. It was really interesting to explore and meet more of Nelson that way. And it was a fun job. And I had to find accommodations for our lead actor. Her name's Jessica
Mm-hmm.
Biel. We'll know her from Seventh Heaven when she was a kid. And now she's married to Justin Timberlake, and plus has her own career. So she's definitely stepped up. So I did some research on her, and she was born in Boulder, Colorado, and she had hippie parents. And so I was like, oh, she's going to love Nelson or hate it. She's going to love Nelson. And I could see she was into yoga and into healthy living. And Justin Timberlake is also an advocate for lots of healthy, wonderful causes. So I was like, oh, this is a good person. Let's find her a great place on the water. And, finally I found this house. So then it asked me if I would be her greeter when she arrived. And I was like, oh my gosh, like so scared. You look at, type Jessica Biel into the internet, you're going to get all these photos of this like glamorous woman. I was just some hippie from Winlaw. So I waited for her and waited and waited. I had to pee so bad, I remember, but I didn't want to leave my post because I was afraid it was going to pull up. So she finally pulls up, and she jumps out of the back of the car, and she's wearing sweatpants and a hoodie and no makeup. And she was like, hi, just completely casual, friendly. And I just felt like, wow, this is actually like meeting a new friend. And we walked around her house, and I showed her where all the light switches were and all the things that a greeter does. Um, and what I had also done is I got my friends together in Winlaw and was saying, well, Jess is coming. Let's give her a big Kootenai welcome. So we got lots of canning and flowers and homemade foods and just filled her kitchen. It was so beautiful. And she was so touched when she came. She's like, oh my gosh, did production do this? And I said, no, I did it with my friends. There was cards for massages, for yoga classes, all sorts of stuff. And she's like, I need to meet your friends. This is really cool. So that began our friendship. But it was also the beginning of the end of my job, because we were going into production on the film. All these people had houses. I had some paperwork that I had to do and all sorts of stuff in the office. But my job was starting to close. And Jessie pulled me aside one day, and she's like, look, I really want you on this film with us. And I have an idea. And the idea is that I hire you as my photographer, and we make a behind the scenes making of the movie book. And I'm going to make copies of it. There was 170 in the end, 172, I think. And make copies of this book, and I'm going to hand them out as a crew gift to everybody who worked on the movie.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm getting chills. Just, the being in the flow and just how one thing leads to another. It's awesome.
As John Lennon said, life's what happens when you're busy making other plans, right? So, so suddenly there I am on set with her. Everybody had met me, which was interesting because everybody who came to Nelson met Ricardo. I was the accommodations person. They spoke, if they didn't meet me, they spoke to me. My name was part of the welcoming crew to Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
So that was great. So I arrived on set now. I'd been working in the office. So now I'm on set for the first time in my life. And it was, imagine like there's lights and cameras and all these groovy people and this movie star who I'm hanging out with. And it's basically given me a golden pass to walk around set and to go in the hair and makeup trailer and go to the wardrobe trailer. And I photographed every single person who worked on the movie doing their job, whether it was the props people or the accountant or all these avenues, and made this really incredible book and had lots of fun. And then the whole production ended, everybody said goodbye, and there I was sitting in Winlaw with this book I had done. And Jessie had said to me, you should be a stills photographer.
Mm-hmm.
But I really love living in Winlaw and homesteading, and I'd been there for 17 years, and I didn't know if I wanted to move to the city to be a photographer. And then a couple years later, I had this epiphany one night, and I was just like, wow, I'm getting older, and here's my choice. I can stay in Winlaw and do these like random jobs and shackle together some sort of security for my life, or I go and I try this thing out. And I was like, I'm gonna go and be a photographer. Like, life is this short. let's have a new chapter. And I just quit my job. I was working for Shambhala Music
That's
Festival.
right. You were the Imagineer, weren't you?
Engineer, yeah, and it was a great job. And I moved to Vancouver, but I didn't know anything really about the film industry other than I had worked on a film and I had this book. So I got a job as a at a entry level position as a production assistant, so kind of the lowest paid, most worked person on hours. And I did that for 6 months, and they were brutal. It was like 80-hour weeks. It
Ooh.
was just exhausting. But through that process, I was the fly on the wall and I learned all about films. I watched the other stills photographers working. I met other stills photographers. My book started to get bounced around until one day I got this phone call and somebody was doing a TV series and they asked if I would do the stills for it because they had worked. Oh, another thing, when I was doing the production assistant thing, because my book had been seen, they allowed me to keep a camera on me and do behind the scenes
Mm.
shots. It's very challenging to get cameras on set. You're normally not allowed to take
Uh-huh.
photos. So it was a big thing. But then after my 15-hour days, I would come home and take those photos into my computer. I would take the best five or whatever, and I would blast them off to all the producers saying it was a great day on set. This is what you missed, maybe five, maybe 10 photos
How
sometimes.
smart.
So they were watching, and plus, I'm a community builder. I love bringing people together, and kind of like, as a camp counselor spirit is still very alive in me. So that was also like I could tell it was working that kind of energetic that it gave people who were sitting in offices that like, oh wow, look what happened on set today. Oh wow, this is really cool. And people start talking about your work and showing pictures, and the camera operators want the pictures of them that you took, and the actors want the behind the scenes photos for their social media. So you kind of generate your own spin as you're doing this
It's brilliant. It
thing.
is brilliant.
Yeah, but again, it wasn't like a contrived idea to
Hmm.
do it. I was aware it was happening, but it was, and then now I'm even more active on those fronts of making sure actors get behind the scenes shots of me. Because every time they post a photo that I've taken, my Instagram followers go up. I can see more people are looking at my work, and my work is all about shaking a hand and having somebody hire you.
Hmm.
It's all about recognition. So yeah, there's that.
Wow. So you came up with the idea to send out photos for the day to the people who were part of the film but weren't on set. That's brilliant.
Right. Yeah, and well, also I wanted them not only just to see my work, but also having empathy that they were sitting in office, and being on set is
Right.
fun. Like it's not always fun, and it's certainly not always easy, and it's certainly not always friendly, but it's exciting, and it's a lot of creative people, you know, putting square pegs in round holes every day as you deal with all the random things that go on in the world, and you're making a movie in the middle of it all, and all these pieces have to fit together. And yeah, so it was just really nice to help those people who weren't on the action of the set to feel included.
Hmm.
And part of my joie de vivre is to kind of inclusivity and kind of that camp counselor spirit that I have. So it was making me feel good about that too. And because I was capturing some really fun, magical moments, like particularly when I would see executive producers and stuff come on set, and just photographing their interactions with the cast, for example, but doing it from a distance. They would have never known there was a camera on them, and then they get home and there's these pictures of this moment that they had that was really beautiful, and it spun that way. And then so I worked on that one TV series, and then I started doing all these MOWs, the movies of the week, and those take about 15 days to film.
Hmm.
But I was only working like 2 or 3 days of the 15 on set. And so it was a slow haul, and eating lots of oatmeal to kind of make my way through this like time of having to buy all this camera equipment.
Mm.
Plus your camera can't make any noise on set. So I had to buy these things called blimps that are very expensive plastic cases with foam in them, so that when you go click, it goes
Oh,
thud.
interesting. I never thought of that, but of course.
We've now graduated into newer technology, and I use a mirrorless camera that is zero sound on
Ah.
its own. So that's great, and it's wonderful to be rid of the blimps because they were heavy and bulky. And I think one of my jobs is to kind of to never be seen in a sense,
Mm.
because don't want to distract actors. Sometimes they're coming onto set, there's going to be an intense scene, and they're emotionally in that state when they come on, even though it's your friend, the actor. Internally, they're starting to process for a scene, and you're sitting there with this big, giant blimp. You know. So now I can be a lot more stealth and keep my camera down closer to my body, and it's just really, really handy. So it has a the fold-out screen, so I don't have to look through the little viewfinder all the time, and yeah, helps keep me energetically out of the actor's bubble. So
yeah, I can see where that would be important, because you don't want to be distracted when you're in character and you've got your emotion for the scene all, juiced up and ready, and then, to have somebody distract you, that would be really annoying.
stills cameras are they step into people's lives in kind of uncomfortable ways. Most of your viewers today are probably uncomfortable in front of a camera. I know I am. So just having a photographer's presence on set can throw people off, like, oh my God, he's going to take my photo. Even though they're having movie stills taken of them constantly, there's something sometimes about a frozen moment that we look at ourselves and like, God, does my neck actually look like that? But it doesn't look like that. And when things are moving, we see people as they normally are. But nobody wants a turkey neck frozen in time on the internet.
True.
So these are things I have to be conscious of and play into people's energetic fields and stuff. But yeah, so now I do it full time. The first couple years were economically challenging. Photography gear is extremely expensive. I've got editing equipment, I've got my computers, I have hard drives, backup hard drives for the hard drives, and just working 1 or 2 days a week, but not able to do any other work because I have to stay committed to being a stills photographer and always available. And so anyway, eventually I got this other phone call from this Netflix TV series for kids called Project MC Squared. It was just a low budget series, and they said, look, we want you. I'd worked with this woman, Mary, on some MOWs, and she called and said, look, we want you to shoot MC Squared. There's these 5 15-year-old girls. They're great. We think you'd be really good with them, and you'd be great energy on set with them. And it's a union show. So I've called the union. If it's a union show and you're a non-union member, you can't work on it, but you can get, I forget what it's called, but you basically get permission to work on these shows. So the union called me and they said, hey, look, this is IATSE 669, and we understand, you'd like to be shooting stills on Project MC Squared. That's fine. We're okay with that. It was a low budget thing, so most of the stills photographers want the bigger shows, Spider-Man and stuff like that. And they said, but we're just wondering why you don't just join the union. And I said, oh, well, I just actually didn't think it was possible, because everybody tells you getting into the stills part of the union is really challenging, and you need to have 90 days paid days on set, and you need to create a hardcover book and put your best stills in it and basically sell your work, and there's all these great photographers doing it, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, the steam started to spin again, and the roller started to go, and off my life went in this other direction. Before I knew it, I was in the union, which cost me $4,000.
Oh my goodness.
35 to join, 500 dues for the year. So suddenly I was down 4,000 again. So it was just this constant like sucking of all of my money. But now, being in 669, I'm qualified to work on any of the big shows. And so now this is the direction where I feel it's kind of like a skipping stone. Like I'm throwing a stone that's kind of skipping onto the big shows. Like I get into one and then I'm back out and I'm working on the MOWs and TV series and get into this really groovy movie. And then I do some more MOWs and a TV series. And I love the MOWs and I love the TV series. Especially TV series, I'm going into my 3rd season with one, and I really get to know the cast and the crew. It's just it's that camp counselor me again is really at summer camp, and I really love it.
Well, it becomes like a family too. I mean, because it's so intense.
Yeah, and it's creative people, and you're all working on this single goal. It's pretty cool. So now I'm hoping in the next couple years to start getting a bigger name for myself and being able to work on shows that maybe travel to Morocco to shoot or So that's kind of on the horizon. But right now, very happily working in Vancouver's very busy film industry.
Yes, it is.
So, yeah.
So, what kept you going during those times when you're spending all this money on fees and equipment, and you don't have much, and there's nothing really concrete out there in the future for you? What kept you going? What kept
That's
you
a
on
good
the
question.
path?
Um, a few things went through my mind as you were just asking that. I think one of them was knowing that my default was a really good default, and that was returning back to Winlaw that I had trouble
Hmm.
leaving
Hmm.
initially. I was like, well, if I fall flat on my face, come skimming out of here, missing a few 10 grand, for whatever, I go back to this cabin in the woods and I garden and I go back to this idyllic life that I quite enjoy. So there was nothing stopping me from reaching as high as I could go because I felt that wherever I landed, I could just like crawl back to Winlaw and say, well, that didn't work out.
Hmm.
Uh, so I felt safe in that. It wasn't that, oh my God, if I fail at this, then what am I going to do? I'm a loser. I didn't have any of that. Like, I just gambled it all because people kept telling me I was good. Even I think as an artist and as, people who create things, and maybe not for everybody. I should just speak on behalf of myself. I look at my work sometimes. I'm like, damn, I don't know. And then somebody will look at it and be like, that's amazing. And you're like, you think so? You give it a few days, you come back to it, and you're like, yeah, actually, that is pretty amazing. But in the moment, I had just taken the picture and I'd seen the live thing, and now life is distilled down to this little freeze frame, and it doesn't always satisfy me, or sometimes it really satisfies me. But people kept telling me that I was good and they believed in me and that I was going to do really well. And like I got invited to this red carpet event one night, and it was a big movie thing, and all the stars would come on a red carpet and you shoot people coming down the red carpet. And the first time I'd ever done anything like that. And of course, I was having an absolute scream because camp counselor spirit in me was having a good time directing everybody and making it lots of fun and, making people do weird stuff. And I saw this man, he was in his 60s, and his partner or wife or girlfriend or sister, whatever, the two of them standing off on the edge. And they were looking at me and they kept smiling at me and waving. And, they were obviously entertained by my entertainer personality that was, as much on the red carpet as on the side of the red carpet. And after it was all done, he came up to me and he said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Ricardo." And he's like, "Where did you come from? I've never seen you before." So I'm from Winlaw. I have this dream of being a stills photographer. And he gives me his card and he said, "I would love to meet you." And it ends up that he was the head of the BC Film Union Association,
Oh.
president. So I went down to the movie studios and he spent about 45 minutes with me, and he kind of mapped out. It's like, it's you're aiming for the hardest bullseye to hit to get into the stills union. It's quite challenging. There's nothing I can really do to help make those things happen other than to guide you.
Mhm.
And he sat down with me and kind of mapped out the process and was like, you just have to remain diligent. You have to remain available. And he kind of set that tone for me. Like, not only did he just allow me to believe in myself again because some random stranger believed in me and took me to his office and sat down with me for 45 minutes on this time on a busy day to tell me that he thought it was really cool. So just his advice and his belief in me was another one of those, like, yeah, just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And I had another executive producer call me into his office one day because of a random amount of another huge story, but these synchronicities with our photos kept crossing and my path kept crossing his. And finally, he's like, "Who is this guy?" Invites me into his office. He's like, "I think you're really good. I think you're going to be very successful. And if you're going to LA, I've got some names for you." He spent half an hour with me and I walked out and I'm like, this is great. Like I'm just doing what I'm doing and I'm getting recognition. And that was enough for me to believe that I was meant to do this. I was hired by a movie star at the beginning. I'm getting people telling me I'm good. I'm getting people calling me into their office because they spotted me in a crowd. And so those sorts of things. I follow something called Kismet.
And what is Kismet?
So Kismet is I think it's a Turkish word originally, Kismet, Kismet.
Mhm.
It's also the nickname of my car. Uh, and Kismet is when coincidence happens, like the most incredible coincidence, just like you can't even believe that that just happened, coincidence. And that's a Kismet. And when Kismet is happening, whether it's like some guy seeing me in all of these, the executive producer, and our paths kept crossing in really incredible coincidental ways until he's finally like, come back to my office. So there's this Kismet energy of like, I'm it. Some people maybe call it following the signs, or um, maybe as simple as living an inspired life or something. But when I'm
Being in
being
the
in the
flow.
flow, being on my path, and I just get these incredible synchronicities. I'm like, that is impossible. And as a matter of fact, I'm just remembering right after I made the decision to become a stills photographer, I was down in California when that epiphany happened. And a couple days later, I was on Venice Beach and having an
Mhm.
incredible day riding my bike around. And I went for dinner and came out, and it was night, and I was unlocking my bicycle. And this man walked up to me and he said, "Hey, man, you want to see something cool?" I said, "Yeah, sure." Opens up his jacket, and inside are these glasses. He pulls out these glasses, and they're very nice frames, but the glass is all this kind of kaleidoscope kind of glass. You put them on, and there'd be 300 Janines in front of me, all sparkling. So going backwards a week, I had been at Burning Man, and I had met a new friend there, Andrew, and he had had a pair of these glasses, first I'd ever seen them. And he told me that his friend Brent made them, and he had a few pairs, but he'd handed them all out. And I asked for the pair he had around his neck. He said, no way. And anyway, so Andrew became one of my good friends that week and is still one of my good friends. So now fast forward back to the man in Venice Beach, and it was at Burning Man where I had this epiphany, like, I'm going to be a stills photographer. I'm going to give this the biggest shot of my life. I'm getting old. I might as well, do something bigger. So Venice Beach opens up his jacket, pulls out these glasses, and I look at him and I say, "Is your name Brent?" And he said, "Yes, it is. Do I know you?"
Oh
I
my
said,
God, I
"No, but
love
I
it.
met your friend Andrew at center camp last week, and he had a pair of those glasses." He goes, "Yo, yeah, Andrew's a good friend of mine. I gave him some to hand out as gifts. Did you get a pair?" I said, "No." He goes, "Oh, here." And he hands me the glasses as a gift.
Oh God, I love it. Oh, I just get chills up and down my spine. I
So
love these
to me,
kinds of
that's
stories.
kismet. And it was also like I had just made this massive decision that I was going to quit my job at Shambhala. I'd spent the day just kind of biking around Venice Beach. When you're traveling and there's that freedom to think and to feel the new winds of
Hmm.
change, like I'm going to do something really different with my life now. This is it. Like I'm on my path. Mr. Kismet walks up with the glasses. I'm just like, bam, like wow, what are the chances out of the thousands of people on Venice Beach, let alone the millions of people in LA, that he walked up to this tall guy?
That's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Even
I
when I,
love it.
I just turned 50 in January and I went on this 6 week trip to Australia. And the day I left, I'm in the airport and you're kind of nervous. I'm going on this big trip and by myself
Hmm.
and standing in line. Someone taps me on the shoulder. I turn around. It's my friend Charles that works on this TV series with me. And he's like, "Oh, I'm going down to LA too. Great." And then there's this other girl, Sydney. She works on the TV series. She shows up. Okay, they're going. That's great. Then I go in, sitting in the departure lounge. Good friend of mine and his dad walk in. They're going down to LA. They're on the same trip. I'm like, "Oh, that's cool." And I'm like, "Wow, Kismet's happening." Sitting there, tap on my shoulder again. I turn around. It's an actor that I know from a TV series, Kevin. I'm like, "Oh my gosh." Like just this amazing amount of Kismet energy. And I'm like, "I'm meant to go on this trip." Okay, the stars
Hmm.
have lined up. Maybe that's how people would would cause it. So anyway, so the kismet is I keep my eye out for it, and when I'm having kismet, I feel very affirmed that my life is moving
Hmm.
in a direction that will have me succeed. It's almost like the universe is entirely behind me, and it kind of twinkles in front of me and shows me like, yes, Ricardo, you're on the right path. Let's show you some
Hmm.
crazy magic right now. Up walks Mr. Kismet. And so these sorts of things are, and I have a bazillion Kismet stories. I just love to tell them. But they're the thing that really kind of have taken me off the beaten track, but keep reminding me like, wow, this is a good path. Like, what are the chances that that would happen other than 100%? And because it happened,
Mm-hmm.
it affirms to me that I can believe in myself and I can eat a lot more oatmeal and I'm going to do this and I'm going to keep going. And life is just this little minute that we get here. And yeah, just nothing ventured, nothing gained. So that's a long answer to your question.
No, it's wonderful. It's wonderful because I really think it's so important. Well, first of all, I've known you for what, maybe about 7 years, and you have such an upbeat, positive outlook, at least when you're around other people. I don't know, of course, how you are when you're by yourself, but you really uplift people. People always feel good around you because you've got such positive energy. And I think that also helps attract those kind of kismet
Right,
situations. You know, we're like magnets for the energy that we put out. It attracts certain kinds of energy, and you obviously have a tendency to attract a lot of really positive. I mean, I'm not saying that everything in your life has been just wonderful, but in general, you have the ability to attract a lot of positive energy, useful energy, and you give it back. You don't hoard
mm,
it. You're always
right.
giving. You're one person who I know who seems to be always giving
That's a nice.
and not hoarding or hanging on to what you have, whether it's emotionally or physically or intellectually. You're always giving of yourself.
Nice to hear. Thank you.
And I think that attracts that kind of being in the flow, the
Mhm.
synchronicities, the kismet. And you're also not afraid to jump in and follow
Right.
it. Did you have any special kismet happening in Australia? I know you were there for what, about 6
I was
weeks?
there for 6 weeks. Yeah, I didn't have in like full kismet other than when I was leaving, but
Mm.
it's not always just the kismet. It's also just the magic in our lives. Like when things are just good, you don't even need the kismet. Doesn't need to remind you of anything. You're just, I was visiting my best friend from when I was 24. He was 19. I lived in Lake Louise for 3 years. I was a bartender and I skied by day and super fun time of my life, of course. And he
Mhm.
was in the dorm next to me and was my best friend and he was my spiritual brother and just that time of our lives was just so exciting. And he went back to Australia, came back 2 years later and said, let's go up to the Yukon together. And so we drove up in my Volkswagen van and it was an amazing summer. And he met this girl and fell in love and off he went. And there was no internet. So unless you sent a postcard, your best friends and soul brothers were gone for ebs. Um, and then 14 years ago, his father passed away and he traveled the world to visit people that meant something to him. Of course,
Mm.
I
Mhm.
was on that list, so he came to visit me, and it was wonderful to reconnect. And then last year, when I was deciding what to do for my birthday, I saw this picture of Jess with a baby on his back. And I was like, wow,
Mm.
Jess is a dad. I promised Jess I would go visit him, and now is the time. So going there and spending time with him and his little child and his partner Ruth was just such a heartwarming, incredible. We were just in a love bubble for weeks. We were just like, we were in the good groove. It was like the day that I left, they were at work and I went walking around the neighborhood. Like I kept breaking down in tears. I was like, oh my gosh, it's been such an incredible time. I just thought it was my life. I didn't think this was going to end. I just live at
Wow.
Jess and Ruth's house now. So it was filled with a lot of emotive gratitude and just yeah. So it wasn't so much kismet as it was just good loving.
Mm-hmm.
Is the end goal, and kismet's just the little sparkle on the way. But mhm.
Right. what I'm coming to here is that, like you just said, you saw a picture
Mhm.
of him with a baby on his back, and that inspired you. That small little incident of seeing that picture inspired you to take a 6-week vacation to
Right.
Australia. Now, how many people are open enough or flexible enough or fluid enough to follow that train of thought?
Yeah, right.
I mean, you could have just seen that picture and got, oh, it's a nice picture. Someday I hope I get to see him
Yeah.
again. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
That's the gist of what I'm getting from all that you've been saying here is your a willingness to move into the unknown.
Right.
Your willingness to follow the threads, the crumb trails
Yeah.
that are being dropped in front of you, and it's like the universe is giving you these crumbs, and it's up to you as to whether or not you choose to follow them. So what okay, let's if something comes up for you, how do you know let's say it's something that maybe really isn't what you want or it doesn't feel right to you. How do you discern
Say
that?
again.
Well, let's say there's a crumb, a trail that's in front of you and you decide not to follow that particular one. How do you
Right.
discern? Is it a feeling? Is it a thought? Is it
Isn't it the worst? Isn't it the worst when life just kind of, either presents you with lots of bad options or lots of good options, but just options in general, where it's so difficult to navigate what it's such a good question. Like it had, I love, there's a Steve quotes job, or Steve Jobs quote. I'm just going to pull it up. It's on my Instagram. It kind of talks about that. But I think when I feel good inside, it's hard to decide sometimes. Like, I remember when I went to Vancouver Film School, I was like, do I go? Do I not go? Do I go? Do I not go? And that voice inside and trying to make the best decision
mhm.
can be such a challenge. But I guess I just always believe that I'm going to make the right decision because the right decision is going to happen, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So sometimes I
Mhm.
need to pause and really think about it. But I know that, life is never defined by one single moment. So it seems like this is the decision that's going to blah, blah, blah. But there's multiple scenarios through your life that are bringing you through the space time continuum and through your life. And, so like this is only one little cross point to decide. But every day you're making decisions that could make your life go in any single direction. I found the quote. I'd like to read
Mhm.
it. It's from Steve Jobs, not Steve Quotes.
Okay.
um, says you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well worn path. I love that. And that kind
Mhm.
of is like,
Mhm.
to answer
Yeah.
your question, maybe it comes down to just confidence. Like, I will make the right decision because no matter what decision you make, it can't be the wrong decision because life will unfold for you in good ways no matter what you do, I believe. Ultimately, sometimes we dip down for longer periods, and there's the peaks and the valleys of life for sure. But we're
Mhm.
never in the valley forever. We always peak again. We always, hopefully, not 100%, of course, there's a lot of issues, but for most people, when we move through the valley, I just remember like it's going to uptake again, like the pieces will come together, and this is needed to help those moments happen. I have this example. I went to the Spiritual Unity of the World gathering back in 1995 up in the Yukon when I went there with my friend Jess. And it was this amazing First Nations gathering, and my first introduction to a lot of First Nations history for the first time, because we
Mhm.
don't get taught it in school, and belief systems and their community and their struggles and all of that. This one woman told this story, and I repeat it often because it was so profound for me at the time, is you're driving in your car and you're late for work and there's someone in front of you that you cannot pass. What's your first reaction? You're angry, right? You might even swear at them. You might get some road rage. You might say some very horrible things to this person who will never hear you. Though they might see you in the rearview mirror, but they're not going to hear you. But what's happening is you are getting the original of that hate and that anger. You're projecting it forward, so energetically somewhere they're getting it. But you're actually getting the full toxic chemical reaction in your body. You're actually feeling hate and anger, which is detrimental to the body.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
besides, later that day, you walk around a corner and you bump into your best friend that you haven't seen for 20 years only because you were slowed down in the morning enough to make that timing happen. And it might not be that day, it might be the next day, or the next week, or the next month, or 10 years from that slow driver. But the
Mhm.
timing of your life is interconnected to every single moment you live. Therefore, she
Mhm.
said, the next time you are slowed down in traffic, send that person love because you get the original and they get the copy, and you're going exactly where you need to go. It was just like, wow, it was such a profound story to me. I was like, so true. Not that I succeed at the anti or the no road rage moments.
Mhm.
That story has played into my life where when things don't seem to be going right, or I'm making a lot of decisions, is it's okay because no matter what I do is gonna it, it's all so connected, and I keep
Mhm.
that in my mindset that that life is more mysterious and more complicated and more magical and more giving than we'll ever know. I
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
trust in that, and I trust that even when I'm slowed down or when I'm in the valley or when I have lots of decisions to make, that it's all going to be all right because I have that person to meet walking around the corner 5 years from now, and I need to be doing this part to get to that part. So I try and
Mhm.
keep it all in that kind of perspective. Like, whoa, this may seem like non-kismety and like bad options in front of me or whatever, but there is this magic to it all that I do my best to remember, even when the angry voice inside takes over.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I'd like to share something that happened to me. I think it really ties into this, and it was so profound. It's a similar thing of what she was telling you. That I was in nursing school at the University of Massachusetts, and I was driving through the campus, and this guy just walks out in front of me. I had to slam on the brakes and doesn't look, just head down, but just shuffling along. And my first reaction was, "You asshole, I almost hit
Yeah,
you. What's your problem?" And then I started thinking and I thought, "Wow, maybe something's wrong. Maybe something just happened.
yeah,
Maybe he's really upset. Um, maybe there's something going on in his life that's just so depressing, that's so upsetting him." And it totally changed my body, the way I was thinking about him. I had compassion. I might have been totally wrong, but it allowed me to let go of that feeling angry. And I came up with a way to have compassion for this person and to be able to send them love from my heart instead of being angry. And that was a really, really pivotal moment for me. And I do it all the time now. I mean, ever since then, I've always tried to think of what might be going on with this person that I can have compassion for them, even though on the outer, I see their behavior as being dysfunctional or in some way not useful. And it gives me an opportunity to have
Right.
compassion instead.
It's a hard thing to remember. It's like the biggest challenge of being human, I think.
Well, I had somebody not too long ago. Came out of Brent Kennedy's school, and she's like all over the place, and kind of slowing down and speeding up. And I'm like, what is going on with you? I really wanted to just try to pass her and get away because, I didn't know what was going on. And then I thought about it. I thought, okay, well, she's coming out of the middle school. Maybe the kids are arguing. Maybe she's trying to calm them down. Maybe, there's something going on. And if nothing else, it allows me to let go of whatever, quote unquote, negative feelings or thoughts I'm going through. And once again, just have some compassion.
Yeah,
I mean, I may be totally
exactly.
wrong, maybe the person is drunk or, something else, but at least,
Like,
at least
better.
I
Yeah.
don't have the hook anymore. I've
Yeah.
taken that emotional hook out, and I can project some compassion to that person. And maybe in some way that's helping them to work through whatever they're going through.
Yeah.
You just don't know, but
We just don't know. Like even yesterday, I was in Vancouver. I saw a little bit of road rage. Somebody was driving slow, and a guy was crossing the street. And the guy crossing the street was yelling at the car, "You got the right of way! What are you doing? You don't know how to drive!" Blah 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 blah. Rah! And he stormed away. And I was like, "Wow! Like, how do we even know that person's from this country
mm-hmm,
driving the car? Like, they might have just arrived here and they don't know about one-way streets, or they're lost and they don't know where they're going. Like, or maybe they're just being kind and letting him walk in front." And but I was just like, wow. And it's interesting to watch people project their anger because it was all their fault. But really, he was the one just faulting himself. But he could have just been like, oh, sorry, and let them pass by and had no emotional charge to it whatsoever.
mm-hmm.
I was like, wow. And then I was like, well, maybe he's had a really bad day. Maybe like somebody really close to him just died, or, who knows what their emotional language is like inside and what a trigger will do to have it erupt in some way. Anyway, life is just complicated.
Mm-hmm. And you're talking about the exact same thing that I was talking about. I remember once I forget where I was now, but it was an area where I had never driven, and I ended up on the one way going the wrong way, and I'm like, oh shit, but people were so kind. They were like, kind of guiding me, rolling their windows down, and they weren't yelling. People were actually being kind to me, and because I must have had I think I had a look of horror on my face. So yeah, I think it was pretty obvious that I realized I had made a huge mistake, but I was so grateful that people weren't being angry and they were being kind and, helping me to figure out how to get off the one way. I was thinking it might be fun to end with, would you like to talk about AI? We were just talking about that before.
Uh-huh.
Because, and one thing I wanted to ask you, because the work you do there's so much at the computer, there's so much with your phone. And we know that, we were talking about kids and being on the computer all the time. And, everybody's got their face in their phone. And how do you deal with that? How do you not get sucked in when so much of your work involves, having to have a cell phone and having to be on the computer? And
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Yeah, maybe I'm sucked in. um, I mean, it's nice being home in Winlaw because there are no cell phones there. And I
right.
feel like every time I go home, it's this nice little exhale, like, I don't have to think about it. But I still carry my phone with me everywhere because it has a camera on it. So oftentimes I just want to take a picture of something.
Sure.
Maybe that's an excuse to always have my phone on me. I don't. And then in the city, I mean, I'm pretty addicted to media as well. I'm on Instagram. I'm constantly kind of feeding my brain all the news in the United States, keeps my inquiring mind wanting to know the news of the day. So I like to go to all the networks, Fox to CNN to BBC to Democracy Now to New York Times, and I just kind of skim through and I get a sense of what everybody's talking about and try and get as many perspectives as I can. And yeah, so there's that sort of time. And then my editing time, the thing is, I really enjoy it. So it's not something I feel like, oh, I want this to be over. Like, I have a really nice screen and I'm proud of my work. It's finessing the final touch.
Mm-hmm. But do you walk around looking at your cell phone and
No, but I think I'm just older, so I'm not that in that generation. Like, I don't want to be looking at my phone when I'm walking around. I want to be looking around.
yeah, that's what I don't get. I mean,
People are into it, like the texting thing. I mean, the other day I was texting somebody and suddenly my phone rang and it was them. And I picked it up. I'm like, oh yeah, we can just talk on the phone. Like, how much faster is that than me like typing like, how are you feeling? Like that was pretty cool. So I also just kind of set limits. Like, I don't text when I'm sitting around with my friends. I don't answer my phone if I'm sitting with friends, or I turn it off. And so I'm good that way and kind of being more as socially acceptable as I can. I kind of keep it to my
mm-hmm.
private.
So you set boundaries for yourself and you keep them.
Like, I leave the house and don't take my phone with me if I'm just going to go get groceries or go for dinner. Like, I don't need it for an hour. Somebody can wait if they've called me. Like, I set things aside.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of kids, we were talking about that earlier, are just on their computers all the time. And this led us to talking about, the future of technology, and there's lots coming down the pipeline, and computers are just going to become more integrated into our lives rather than less. So yeah, I think this is kind of the time where we need to figure that out, and how do we teach kids not to be on them all the time, but they're also doing things that are very interesting, and kind of this global experiment on access to all information at any time you want. What's this, what's that, and down the rabbit hole you go, and meeting people online and chatting with them. And I'm pro technology and nervous of technology. Like, I didn't do the thumbprint on my phone where I give them my,
Mm-hmm.
my thumbprint. Mind you, watching my phone all the time. If they want a thumbprint, I'm sure whoever wants a thumbprint could do that. So I'm kind of wary of it. I went to this great talk and I began to talk to you about it. I'm just segueing through my brain here about technology. And it was at the Center for Dialogue down on Hastings Street in Vancouver. The mayor of Vancouver was there, and city councilors and business leaders, and me. I got invited by a friend who was organizing it. And it was a talk by this gentleman named Jeremy Rifkin. So he's, in my determination, he's a futurist, he's an economist, and he's an environmentalist. He walks a lot of different platforms and he talks a lot of different talk, which is something I found. I go and see an environmental, anti-pipeline people, and I'm like, okay, great, but this is awesome, and I totally side with you guys, 110%, lines drawn in the sand, I stand with you. But we're always preaching to the choir because it's always all of us who show up.
Mm-hmm.
Here's Jeremy Rifkin, who's done some incredible research looking into what he calls the third industrial revolution. So he kind of laid out where technology is going, and talked about how there was this incredible change that is about to happen with artificial intelligence, which is no longer something of science fiction. We're within years of artificial intelligence being a big part of our lives. We're seeing it with Alexa, I think it's called, that Google or Amazon
there's Alexa,
thing.
There's Echo.
Yeah, and they're just listening to you. You can talk to them all the time. So this is the very tip of AI technology into our lives. And artificial intelligence will be in everything we do. Computers will be integrated. The Internet of all things. There's going to be a 5G network, and it's going to allow for self-driving cars. He was talking about in the future, it will seem odd for people to think that you owned a car, because why own a car when you can just summon a car and a self-driving car will just pull up 3 minutes later and take you where you need to go. So people won't need to have cars in the future. But he's also an environmentalist. So he's looking and saying, okay, we're losing species every year at an alarming rate, and we're in an extinction crisis. And if we don't do something to deal with this, estimates are we'll lose half of the animal population within X amount of years. What is it, 50 years,
Wow.
100 years? So he kind of, and plus there's climate change and there's ocean acidification, blah, 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 all these issues all together. What are we going to do? He says, well, we need to decarbon the economy. And he has worked out how this will look. And he calls it the third industrial revolution. He just wrote a book. I also sent you a link, and you can attach that onto the talk. So it's him, the movie, The Third Industrial Revolution, is just him talking. It's the exact same talk I saw. They'll do some cutaways to show what he's talking about. It's a riveting conversation about how we get from here to there. How do we go from being a carbon-based culture to a carbon-free culture, and who pays? The government doesn't have any money. I have to watch it numerous times so I can even get his jargon into my brain. So in moments like this, I can be one of his evangelists and speak what he speaks. I can't do that yet. Just direct people to the movie because it was such an inspiring way of decentralizing power systems, reinventing our infrastructure and our traveling systems and all sorts of stuff that's going to create tons of work for 3 generations as AI replaces most of our traditional work. So a lot of jobs in the next number of decades are going to disappear because of automation and artificial intelligence. What's interesting about the artificial intelligence is there's going to come this point that they call the singularity. And the singularity is when AI gains its own self-awareness, its own consciousness.
That's kind of scary.
It's very scary. And he talks about how scary it is and how wonderful it is in terms of it's going to make these incredible advances because the computer, or what they're calling the brain, will actually know everything simultaneously. It will know everything about us, everything we're doing. It will learn about humans very quickly because we're all connected to the internet. Everything we have is connected to the internet and artificial intelligence. And this is going to be able to monitor all of that or to know it all simultaneously. So is the brain going to be good or is the brain going to be bad? This is sort of the moral issues that are going to be coming down the pipeline.
Wow. You can just kind of go, oh, okay, this is coming. It's scary. It's exciting, blah, blah. But when you really make an effort to really think about what this means, it's pretty amazing. Yeah. I don't think we can really grasp the ramifications. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, when you watch that movie, it's a big thing. So, I mean, that goes back to your question of what about technology? Just even where we're at with technology is going to completely change again. So, when people had the first remote controls for their TVs with a wire that went to their TV and all the physical buttons on those things, and then that went away, and then people have remote control and they get into that, and then DVDs disappeared, and it's just this constant roll. The keyboard is going to disappear. We're going to interact with these things in quite a profoundly different way. So maybe all these kids spending all these times on the computer is going to help them in the world they're going to live in. I don't really know.
I just want us to keep our humanity,
right,
along with it.
Keeping it real with Janine. You go, girl. Yeah.
So what was the name of the movie again? Because I really want to watch it.
It's called The Third Industrial Revolution.
Okay. Is it on Netflix or Amazon Prime?
It's YouTube for free.
Oh, on YouTube. Okay.
Yeah, I think it has 1 million hits now or close to it. And Jeremy Rifkin is the man who speaks in the film, and I sent you the link there.
Okay, great.
And he also wrote a book called The Third Industrial Revolution. I think he's done 20 books.
Oh, prolific.
Hydrogen Economy, the Beyond Beef, lots of these kind of alternative books. I've been following his work for a number of years. As a matter of fact, in 92 or something, my very first action or political thing I ever did was I read Beyond Beef, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then the Beyond Beef Foundation had this Adopt a McDonald's campaign where they adopted 300 McDonald's or something across North America, and we would stand outside of McDonald's on the specific day and hand out information about how many resources the cattle industry was using and the destruction of the Amazon and all this sort of stuff. And we were requesting, imagine this, we were requesting that McDonald's put a veggie burger and more healthy options on their menu. Well, fast forward to 2018, and you've got salads and all sorts of stuff at McDonald's. So we were just a little bit ahead of the curve. McDonald's did not put a veggie burger on their menu at that time, nor did they kind of change their stuff. But it was the first time that I felt really empowered. I read something, I heard something, I was like, wow, I need to take some action on this and help this cause, because I believe it's true. I still do to this day on that one. But Jeremy Rifkin kind of catapulted me from being a drinking ski bum to a little bit of an activist there for a day. So that was, yeah.
Thank you for that. I am definitely going to watch it. Ricardo, this has been really, really fun. Thank you. I think
it's like being at your house with a cup of tea. We got to go.
You lead such a creative, interesting life, and I hope that your way of interacting with yourself and the people around you, and how you've managed to stay in the flow, even when it didn't seem like it was financially possible. I mean, you could have just quit at any time, but you really do follow your heart. That's one thing I've always noticed about you, is you are a very heart-centered person. And I think that comes through in your joy for living, in what you're doing with your life, and in how you've become successful in your life. And you're definitely to be commended, and you're definitely an inspiration.
So nice to hear that. Thank you so much, Janine.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. You could put a link to my Instagram. Maybe I'll send it to you.
Oh, yes, that's right. Oh, thank you. I always ask my guests for how they would like people to connect with them. Thank you.
Yeah, and then if people have any questions or they just want to say hi, I invite them to do that. I'm very, very chatty on Instagram if people talk to me. So yeah, that's nice. And also to see my work there too.
Okay, so that's the best access for you.
I'll send my website too. I need to update it, so I'm a little I don't show it, but I will be updating it. But I'll send you a link to both my website, ricardohubbs.com, and also to Ricardo Hubbs Photo on Instagram. So
okay, great. And Hubbs has 2 B's in it, everybody. So it's ricardohubbs.com.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank
you so much. This has been wonderful, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Have a good day, Janine.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to Keeping It Real with Janine. New episodes come out every 2 weeks. If you enjoy my conversations, please consider subscribing to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast provider. It would be lovely if you also left a review. Do you know someone who would enjoy my conversation with Ricardo? I'll bet you do. He really is an inspiration. Please share the love. Go to the podcast website, realjanine.com, and remember JANEAN, once again, where you can listen, download, see pics of my guests, and enjoy the show notes. Take a moment to subscribe to the email list, and you will get bonus recipes with each bi-weekly email I send out. Take care and be well.